Good afternoon, everyone. Hope all is well. So, we are right now going to be going live with a real estate agent based in London who is a broker in the prime real estate market in London. Like myself, I deal with luxury properties as well, but I do deal with other buy to let investments. So I do a whole lot of stuff, but they actually just do prime real estate in London. And it's going to be good to talk about how the prime real estate market in London is shaping up. It'd be Kensington, Knightsbridge, Mayfair, Chelsea, Belgravia, so we're going to be talking about how it's shaping up and what's the market looking like right now. So send this over to Richard Clean, who is going to be joining me, and we're going to be speaking about the prime real estate market. Richard, you need to join from your phone, because if you join from a PC or an iPad, it doesn't work. So could you kindly join from your phone, and then we can get the conversation going? Here we go. Super.
Morning. Hi.
Morning, Richard.
Or afternoon now.
Afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. All is well. Thank you so much for joining me,
My pleasure.
taking your time out and sharing the knowledge, sharing the positivity. We're going to be discussing a lot about the prime real estate market. That's what you deal in London. And it's good to have you here to know more about how the real estate market, the prime real estate market of London, is shaping up in today's property market in the UK. So thank you so much.
Pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Before we get going, Richard, if you can introduce yourself as to who you are and what you do, and then we can get the conversation going.
Sure. So my name is Richard Klein. I have been in real estate for 16 years in prime central London, ostensibly. I'm a born and bred Londoner, and I was born pretty much in central London. So I was born in Fitzrovia in the old Middlesex Hospital.
Okay.
Which now ironically is a new residential development, of course, as London is. So I can't even visit where I was born. I can possibly try and buy an expensive apartment there, but that's about the closest I'll get.
Just to revisit your birthhood, I would say.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah.
I grew up in an area of London called Maida Vale, which is in West 9 in London, which is pretty central.
Yep.
In a pretty typical family house there with 3 other siblings and my folks. And I sort of stumbled into real estate, like lots of the guests that have come on to your lives.
Yep.
It wasn't something that I naturally had gravitated towards because I had a particular passion for it when I was in school.
Okay. I mean, so while you were growing up, we all have our aspirations to become possibly a doctor or a lawyer or a police officer, an architect, an engineer. What is it that you aspire to be in life before you knew that, okay, real estate is the thing that I want to get into? But before that, did you have anything else in mind? Going to school, going to college, university? What did you aspire to be?
Not really. I mean, I would have loved to have been a professional soccer player, but I wasn't good enough. I loved playing, but I wasn't good enough. I mean, that was the aspiration when I was a kid. I think like a lot of kind of kids growing up, perhaps in the UK. Look, at school, I kind of did most social sciences. I ended up going to do politics at the University of Birmingham in the UK and studied there for 3 years, had a great time. Still didn't really know what I wanted to do when I left. I actually worked for a political consultancy in London when I came back to London 20 plus years ago. But I've done all kinds of jobs. I mean, I've worked as a sort of 16-year-old kid. I worked at Citibank, getting some experience there. I thought I might go into investment banking because relatives were in investment banking and it was very lucrative for them.
Yeah.
But like I said, for me, it was sort of coincidental that I fell into property. The family home that I grew up in that part of London in Maida Vale was being sold you know, when I was in my 20s, early
Okay.
20s, and all the major estate agents came round locally. And, you know, one of them was a company called Saviles,
Okay.
you know, which is well recognized in this sort of prime
Yep.
central London space. And I thought, you know, the estate agents who came around were pretty polished, you know, pretty bright people. And I thought, well, maybe that might be something I could look into. And then I interviewed with them in their office in Hampstead, where I went to
Wow.
school, so I knew the area pretty well.
Okay.
And I sort of went to the interview not really knowing much about them and not doing very good preparation, and luckily got the role, because actually that was a fantastic starting point for my career.
I mean, working for Saviles, a lot of the agents that, uh, even graduates that come out of university or estate agents like myself, yourself, they dream to work for a company like Saviles and Knight Frank, you know, because the exposure that you get, uh, the backing of that brand is so huge that it transforms the individual. I mean, we've seen big names getting transformed from where they were to where they are today, like yourself as well, being 16 years in this industry, and that's shaped you up to become a prime real estate dealer in London. So it's absolutely amazing to know about it. How was it working for Saviles, and how long did you work for them? And did you see a transformation in their uh, work ethics, their business environment, the way they dealt with properties? How was it working for them?
Yeah, I mean, you know, these are brands you've already sort of alluded to. I mean, these are really established brands, and
Of
actually,
course,
I think for most estate agents, the kind of aspirations to work for those kind of top tier of estate agents. Although
absolutely,
there are lots of very good operators who aren't as big as Saviles or Knight Frank, but you know, Saviles has been around for over 150 years. So if nothing else, they have that longevity in the
of
market where,
course,
you know,
of course,
you know, they really made a name for themselves by selling big aristocratic houses
of
150
course.
years ago.
Yep,
How have they changed? I think they're quite traditional still in their outlook, if I'm totally honest. You know, I think that, you know, what people like yourself are doing and what other people are doing on social media shows the way forward for the property industry,
of
particularly
course,
for agents. And I'm sure we'll come on to that. But, you know, I think there is a level and expectation of service when you go to these places. So, you know, they train their staff really well. There is an understanding of how you deal with clients, how you treat your clients, how you respond in a really efficient way, how you manage those clients' expectations the whole way, give them really good, solid advice,
of course,
and also aspire to get the best possible price for them when you're selling a home on their behalf.
absolutely.
But I started off in second-hand agency, so I was selling apartments, sort of local apartments,
Okay,
historical apartments in Hampstead. And then I moved into a more development consultancy role, which effectively means I was working on new developments in central London. And that was about 18 months into my career.
wow. So just it took you 18 months to get from selling second-hand properties to now first-hand properties. Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
I think, look, I think for anyone in their career, they have to have some luck. It was
Of
lucky that
course,
I stumbled across Saviles, who I didn't know of before I interviewed with them. It was lucky that I was able to actually be taken under the wing by a mentor of mine in that office, who then went on to development work. And again, you do need a bit of luck in your career to get to where you end up.
absolutely. Um, Now talking about the prime real estate market, what inspired you to get into that field? You mentioned that you were in Hampstead.
Hmm.
Why the change? I mean, a lot of agents these days, they want to sell properties in Hampstead, and Hampstead is still one of the prime residential areas. I mean, it's popular with celebrities, it's popular with footballers, it's popular with a lot of people that want to live there, businessmen, entrepreneurs who want to send their kids to school. Why the change into prime real estate market in central London?
It was more on the development side. I mean, I was selling really beautiful historic houses, but actually what I was really interested in was very big developments of, you know, hundreds of units, you know, master plan schemes. I was, again, super lucky to be at Saviles at the time when we were the main advisor for the Olympic Village for 2012
Yep,
for the Olympic Games. And so
yep,
I was doing a huge amount of consultancy work on schemes for 5,000 units. And that for me was really interesting because it was a much higher level, more holistic view of development. It wasn't just the individual houses, the individual apartments, which I loved as well, but actually it was much more about
and
what does this.
there was a quick turnaround, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
the more the units, the better the sale. You know, you can go out and turn these around pretty quickly. And
Yeah, I mean,
have,
the pace of sale is significantly higher, but I mean, you're, as a consultant involved in these projects, maybe 3, 4, 5 years before they even come to market. And what's interesting is that you are taking effectively a blank sheet of paper and saying, what does this place look like in 5, 10, 15 years from now? And that for me is really interesting, because it kind of plays into the idea of what we colloquially call placemaking, of coming up with a space. I mean, you know, the Olympic Games is a really great example in one of the most underdeprived boroughs of London.
absolutely.
And huge swathe of land that was underdeveloped and was kind of not in a very good state. And we had to come up with plans for how we were going to build this magnificent, you know, what is now the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, multiple buildings, how a business is going to run, where are cafes, bars, restaurants, schools, you know, open spaces, how do they all integrate with that residential portion to make it a place that people would want to live in, not just now, but in the future?
Of course.
So
And
me,
how long,
that development work was great fun.
how long did that planning take for you to put together the whole plan for the Olympic Village?
I think we were doing it for the best part of 2.5 years.
Wow.
A lot of work. I mean, you know, a lot of it is feasibility studies. You know, you deep dive into the financials of what works. You know, so
Sustainability.
Sustainability, absolutely. You know, there'll be a difference of opinion because these are such huge seismic developments. You know, lots of stakeholders. Maybe they change their opinion. Maybe they want a school which they didn't factor in before, and the residential proportion becomes less or more. And so you're building up a plan. And, you know, people's views change about what they'll want in the future. So,
of course,
you know, are we going to have a single kind of big tower that's the placemaker for the area and build smaller towers around it? Or do we have a series of buildings that are the same height? And architects' views change. And often, as part of that consultancy team, you're trying to build apartments that are fit for purpose. And the architects obviously design from the outside in. We like to think of it from the inside out. So the buildings look beautiful, but actually, are they the right size? Is the kitchen too small? You know, are the doors in the right place? All the really micro details that make things livable and desirable for the environment.
Because at the end of the day, the architect doesn't know how to sell a property. It's the agent who sells a property, right? And you're right in mentioning that as an agent, you've got to think from the inside out, because if the inside's good, then it can view whatever.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think on the flip side, it means that actually, unfortunately, I think in London, you know, we have a lot of residential buildings that don't look great because actually that's an afterthought. And sometimes there's a real balance between getting things that are exceptionally well planned internally, but also that are still attractive from the outside. Some of the most famous buildings we think of in London are things like churches and bridges and tall, you know, skyscrapers, but none of them are residential. So I think in many ways, residential developers are missing a trick to create beautiful buildings that fit for purpose, both on the inside and on the outside.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you just mentioned out here, Battersea Power Station seems to be a prime example of that in terms of what they've created with the exterior part of the buildings and the offerings on the inside. But that's just another part of it. But it just goes to show how architects are now, I mean, putting London into context, architects are now thinking how to design those beautiful buildings that look attractive to look at and to live in.
Yes, and I do think, you know, there has been a sea change. I mean, Battersea Power Station is a fantastic example. You know, probably in the last 10 to 15 years, we've started to see these, what we would again call starchitects, you know, the really big architects of the world, you know, the Frank Gehry's of this world, who are attracted to coming to somewhere like Battersea Power Station, designing a really cool, weird, crazy building. I imagine the people designing it on the inside have had more difficulty than normal, or the angular shapes and craziness doesn't lend itself to kind of easy boxes to design. But what it does mean is actually, if you've got the Richard Rodgers of this world and, you know, Renzo Pianos, if they're designing residential buildings, not just things like the Shard, suddenly you'll see some really beautiful buildings. And actually, we all take pride from a civic perspective, both in
Of
our
course.
built environment, but also where we live. We want
Of
to say
course.
to our friends, look up at that building, that's where I live. Not,
Exactly.
"Ooh, that's where I live, it's not very
Yeah,
nice, it's clad, in concrete," or whatever it might be. So there's a pride element as well. So I think the better designed buildings are better for the built environment, but also better for the health and wellness of the inhabitants.
absolutely. Now, coming back to the prime central London market, how did you step into the market? I mean, you mentioned that you were in Hampstead. What made you move towards working in the prime central London market? And how did it change the way you think about property? Because dealing with Hampstead, dealing with the Olympic Village, dealing with, for example, Battersea Power Station, yes, it is London, but then what defines London is the central London prime real estate market. So how did you stumble upon it, and how did it change how you think about property?
Well, at the time when I moved to the Saviles head office, they were based in Mayfair. They're now just behind Oxford Circus, but at the time they were in Mayfair.
Yeah,
And look, a lot of their clients were big clients in central London, and naturally, again, you're kind of gravitating towards their client base. We were a relatively small team at the time. It's now grown to a much bigger size, but lots of the clients would have properties within central London, and naturally, if you became an expert within that particular geography, you were given projects that were in Mayfair, in Knightsbridge, in Kensington, in Belgravia. And so I think it's by association. You learn on the job. Going back to my education, doing a politics degree, I did end up doing a master's degree in property valuation and law at City University.
okay.
But whilst that was useful from, I suppose, an academic point of view, maybe from an ego point of view, I'm doing a master's degree, actually the on-the-job learning was much more measurably important for me in terms of understanding the property market centrally, understanding what the drivers were for buyers looking in prime London, understanding what developers wanted to put into their projects in central London.
Absolutely.
And these areas have historically been the areas people want to live in. I mean, if you look
Richard,
at
we've got Daniel Daggers here, which is absolutely amazing, and this is the first time he's actually joined my live. So thank you for coming on, Daniel Daggers.
There you go. But what's interesting about the central London market is, the areas that we see as being desirable in 2020 were the areas that have been desirable since the sort of late 16th century. The great estates that we look at, the Portman estate, the De Walden estate, the Grosvenor estate, they've owned huge swathes of central London. And so areas such as Mayfair, Belgravia, Kensington, Knightsbridge, these have been desirable areas for 300 years plus. They haven't become less desirable. I think just the values have significantly increased over the years just because, there is a finite amount of space that can be built upon.
And the elite population of the world is attracted to that part of central London. And I mean, recently, only in January, we saw the property in Rutland Gardens being sold for £200 million by Beecham Estates. I mean,
yes, correct.
This is what it shows, that prime central market, the real estate market, just keeps increasing because there is that demand of people who want to live there.
Yeah, I mean, and as I said, I think you've got different factors. I mean, one of them is, planning restrictions don't allow you to build, lots of these buildings within these areas are listed, which means, of course, you can't touch the facades of them, you can't demolish them and start again. And so, again, that scarcity of availability drives people towards these areas. And naturally, if you have, it's the law of mathematics. If you have 10 people vying for one property, that value of that property is going to obviously significantly increase over time. And so I do think these areas will remain desirable, but we are seeing, the global elite are a little less postcode specific, more driven by quality of the offering. So I think you will see in the future people who are very, very wealthy, either high net worth individuals or ultra high net worth individuals, maybe coming onto the periphery of more traditional areas because they see that there's value in buying a property and it gives them everything that they need.
Of course. Now, what I wanted to ask you about the prime market out here, in 16 years of doing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
In 16 years of you doing this, how have you seen the market transform itself into being the best real estate market within the UK, within the world? And how would you advise people who may come to you and say, okay, we want to buy in London, but we're not sure of where to buy? You know, we want to buy the best house in London, but we don't know what the postcode, what location we can go and buy it in. How would you advise them to look at the prime central market, even though you're sort of clustered together within areas? I mean, Mayfair is not that far from Knightsbridge. Knightsbridge is not that far from Kensington. But, you know, someone may want to have those big, vast views over gardens and parks, you know, and they may come up to you, Richard, I would like to live in Hampstead, but I want you to show me London. How would you advise them, and how would you change their mind around for them to come and buy into the prime real estate market in London, Kensington, Chelsea's, Mayfair's, Belgravia's?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. London as a city, even in my career, actually in my lifetime, has changed radically. I mean, I remember, you know, anecdotally going on the Underground, the Tube in London, and, you know, 30 years ago, and actually you only really heard English voices. You know, you occasionally heard a foreigner. In the last, you know, 10 years particularly, you now barely, going on the Tube today, will hear someone speaking English. It's all foreign languages. And London has massively transformed into a real melting pot of different races, religions, cultures. It's a very open society. You know, it's very welcoming to the world, geographically incredibly well positioned for trading both east and west. And, you know, in direct answer to your question, how would you, you know, find and help someone? Well, you really need to understand their needs. You know, what are their motivations for buying? And everyone is driven by a particular motivation, whether it is their kids going to a certain school, or whether it's the cachet of living in a particular area because they want to show off to their friends that they live in Knightsbridge near Harrods or near Harvey Nichols, or whether it's, you know, I think what's been interesting in the last, you know, few months with everyone in lockdown is actually whether you're living in a £500,000 apartment or a £50 million apartment, you know, people want outside space.
Exactly.
They want serenity. They want calm. They want their house to be their castle, their kingdom. And so I think that the motivation for lots of people is actually, weirdly, whatever spectrum you're on the wealth scale, is to find somewhere that's a bit of a sanctuary. So what we have seen in the last few months is certainly people that want, you know, to be less involved with busy parts of London. So I think you'll probably see people moving to slightly more greener spaces, maybe in the Hampstead, Highgates of this world. And less so perhaps in places like Mayfair, which are on the edge of Oxford Street, Regent Street, where, you know, when we do get back to normal, there'll be tourists coming back in their droves, and maybe people go, actually, I don't really want to be there anymore. You know, I want my family to be safer away from that sort of area. I think when you're trying to narrow down areas, it's really important with any buyer that you don't give them too much choice. You know, if you go into a candy shop and, you know, there are 100 jars, you know, you're never going to make a decision on which bit of candy you're going to eat. That's the reality of it. You know, if you go to any of your clients and say, you know, because we're lucky, we do, you know, through our partners have access to some unbelievable properties pretty much in every postcode in London. I don't want to open a book to someone and go, take your pick, because they'll never choose. So if someone's in Knightsbridge, I want to know their motivations to why they want to be specifically in Knightsbridge, and whether they might choose Kensington, but they don't necessarily want to be in Mayfair, because that's quite a different neighbourhood. So you want to be very specific with your clients and actually understand their needs, not waste their time, because they are incredibly time poor, the sort of people that you deal with at the top end of the market. You know, they have a really
the more the money, the less the time.
Always the way, right?
Absolutely.
That's always the way. You know, these are busy people. This probably isn't their primary residence. They have multiple homes all over the world. So they have really clear criteria about what their house in London needs to do for them. Maybe it's a place that they spend 6 months of the year doing business. Maybe it's just their holiday home. So you need to understand that as much as anything, and then drive, because a lot of them is lock up and leave. So security is critically important to wealthy individuals. And so, you know, does it have the right kind of CCTV and security measures in place around the periphery of the building? You know, is it secure? Is it discreet? Maybe it's behind really high hedges. All those things are things you need to understand to drive people towards what they want to buy.
Some amazing points you've made out here. And this is what I want to do. You mentioned about people wanting their outside spaces in today's day and age, with all this virus and lockdown and all that kind of stuff that's happening around us. Have you seen a great high demand in house, like people wanting to live in houses than people wanting to live in apartments. Have you seen that during these last three,
Yes.
4 months?
Yeah, I think unquestionably that's what people's one of the main drives at the moment has been. You know, there will be people that have to move from the basis of maybe they've just had another kid and they, you know, the third bedroom isn't big enough, they need another bedroom, they need a fifth bedroom, whatever it might be. But there's no question that time and time again, when we're speaking to very wealthy people at the moment, they want to be in their own castle. They want to
And do
be
you think
away
this
from
is,
integrating.
and do you think this is going to have an effect on the prices of the apartments to the prices of the houses? I mean, normally when we see it, apartments do tend to sell for more, and year on year again, people do tend to make a good capital gain on that, rather than a house where you would keep it and possibly it would appreciate or double the price, double your capital appreciation within 10 years' time. Do you think that 10 years is now going to come down because of the way the market is, the world is shaping up? Do you think that's going to be a case?
I almost think it's a bit too early in this particular cycle, in this particular trend, as to see if it is a long-term trend. It very much depends on kind of society we expect. I mean, from reading so many different articles, like everyone is at the moment, no one truly knows whether we're going to see a lot more people work home as they have been for the last few months. You know, not everyone is able to do that. You know, but I do think that really large scale development is not going to be desirable as it has been in the past.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that what we've seen in really high-end condo buildings in London, particularly, is the amenities that are on offer within that building means you don't have to go outside. And I think we will see a continuation of that trend. You know, One Hyde Park, which is a really famous development in central London, which a lot of your viewers will know.
Yep.
Built in 2009 by the Candy brothers, really famous, but it was the first branded residences with the Mandarin Oriental.
Yep.
It offers all your services there. You never
Of
need
course.
to leave your apartment. You can get food
Absolutely.
delivered from the Mandarin Oriental. You can use a gym, a spa. You know, you can play virtual golf, you can have meetings there, and you can live within your apartment. So I think that trend will continue.
Absolutely.
Exclusivity, security, discretion, those are the things that global elites are really looking for, and I think they'll continue
And
to look for.
do you think developers will need to come up with these spaces for people to not leave those properties and look at going to the gym outside, or, you know, going to a meeting in Berkeley Square, all that kind of stuff, that would have to be in-house? And do you think developers have to look at this point really carefully so that there is less interaction of human interface between each another? You know, do you think that's the case? And
I
do you
think so,
think
absolutely.
developers
Yeah.
should look at that?
Yeah, I think they're always really attuned to what's going on in the markets. And actually, a lot of the time, a lot of the trends we've seen at the top end of the market have come out of North America, particularly New York, you know, really sophisticated real estate markets, similar population size to London. But a lot of the amenities that we saw have kind of been dialed down a bit. You know, I think that sometimes people coming into a building don't want to pay an astronomical service charge. So I think you'll see probably less swimming pools and more business orientated facilities, you know,
Like
rooms,
meeting rooms
that
and
sort
all
of
that.
thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. As people want to work, you know, I think you undoubtedly going to see less people moving, gravitating towards their office buildings. You know, I think a lot of the huge banks, investment banks, have already come out and said, you know, Barclays of this world have said, you know, we're not going to expect our workers to come back in droves in their tens of thousands. You know, a lot of the tech companies have said the same thing. So working from home will absolutely be a trend, which I think is here to stay. So as a result, developers will have to come up with business suites that are bigger, that are really well connected, have fantastic broadband. You know, super fast broadband is going to be a really critical thing for people moving into a building.
Absolutely.
You know, as we have more people working from home, more kids, you know, potentially not going to school and using, you know, playing games online, that sort of thing. Broadband will be super important. And also as well, you know, things like cybersecurity. You know, it's a really important thing now. So again,
Exactly.
how secure is the building? You know, I'm a really wealthy individual who is, you know, dealing with really big business deals. I don't want to know that, you know, my emails are being looked at. So those, again, will be really important things, less so than, you know, the little add-ons like swimming pools, perhaps, and spas.
So it's more the tech than the amenities, which you think that developers should look at when building out these prime developments in the central London market. Some great points you've made, Richard. And thank you so much for coming on here,
My
sharing
pleasure.
some amazing, great knowledge on the prime real estate market in London, in central London. It's been great talking to you. But before you go, I do this with all my guests that come on here. Please share some positive advice for all the people out there, the viewers who are here, the viewers who are going to watch this later. What positive advice would you like to share with them so that they can take that on board and move forward in life?
Look, markets like life are cyclical, right? So the reality is there are ups and downs, and what we're going through, I think, globally at the moment is a really tough time for everyone. But there is always light at the end of the tunnel. There will always be better times ahead. People just have to stay super positive. Really look after their health. I think recognize, all the really good things they've got in their life, appreciate the things that they've got in their life, loved ones, family. And I do think that we will come out of this stronger because I think, have maybe sat back and reappreciated what we have in life. It's not all about just going to work and working 10, 12-hour days and never seeing your family. This period of lockdown has been difficult for a lot of people. But like I said, I think it's made people appreciate that, interacting with loved ones, friends, family are so important. Or health is so important.
Absolutely.
And like I said, these things are cycles. In tougher times, we'll come out of them. The property cycle is no different to a life cycle in many ways.
Yep.
You'll go through difficult times in your career, in your life, but you've got to stay positive. And, the better things are definitely ahead for all of us, I think, once we come out of this situation.
Absolutely. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been
My
a great pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, really.
And hopefully one day we may do a deal together.
I hope so. I hope so. Sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. In prime central London. Thank you so much, Richard.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
So that was Richard Klein, who is a real estate broker in the prime central London market. Anyone listening out here looking for a property in the luxury end of central London, Kensington, Knightsbridge, Mayfair, Chelsea, Belgravia, even Hampstead, like you mentioned, his career started at Hampstead and today he's selling properties in the central London market. Do give him a shout. Get in touch with him if you're looking for a property in the central London market. And thank you to him. Thank you to all the viewers, and a big, massive thank you to Daniel Daggers, who joined us today. I think he's turned up on my first live session. I'm going to take a snap. But thank you for tuned in today. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Stay tuned. We've got another live session at 3 p.m. where I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.